Hello, my name is Eleanor. I'm a traditional graphic and watercolor artist, and I'm glad to welcome you to my lesson where I try to help you get better understanding of watercolor painting, where we practice our drawing skills, painting skills, improve our visual composition, and whatever your goals are, I'll try to help. Today we are going to paint this romantic landscape with a fountain, sky, evening sky, water and reflections, because sky, water and reflections are the most spectacular but difficult subject in watercolor. So to speak, it's not a piece of cake, but today we are going to learn how to make it easier. And firstly, I'll tell you a few words about composition, how it's better to plotting your drawing for watercolor, or doesn't matter for what else, about the rules, how we use them, how they help us, and how we can change the rules, because we don't need to follow the rules completely. Then I explain you how to prepare the sheet of paper for this type of painting, because it's quite special painting, watercolor wet and wet, and there are a few features that you need to know, and that will help us to paint with more comfort. And then it will be time for the most pleasant part, the watercolor painting themselves. And during this process I will tell you in details how to work with background, foreground, how we choose the tonal ratio, and how we work with color, how we mix them better with about lights, shades and other stuff. And at the end I'll give you a tip of how to dry such painting, your finished artwork, because you want to avoid waves of paper that usually happen when you wet a sheet of paper. So it will be also better to know and dry your artwork almost flat, like this one. So before the start, let's check our equipment, that we have all we need on hand, and of course the paper themselves for our artwork. Usually I use 300 grams paper. You can use thicker or thinner, it's up to you. Only things I would like to say that the thicker paper is, the longer you can work with it without additional water. So it keeps water inside for longer time. The thinner your paper is, the faster it will dry, and you will need to add more water, and in that case your process won't be very comfortable. But actually it's possible with all variants. All options are possible. Then the next very important tools for this special technique is a glass. I use a plexiglass, but it can be any water resistant surface, because the main reason why we need it at keeping water between sheet and this surface, and this water will help work a longer time. So the next thing is brushes. Mostly I use round brushes. I really admire my Princeton brushes collection. I'm just in love with their artificial squirrel. But also you need a few flat brushes. Why? Because they help you to cover a bigger square of your painting with one color like this, or water, or whatsoever. For the same reason, I use ceramic palette because it helps me to make some special color for sky, for example, and use it. So make it once and use it, and don't repeat it again and again. That usually happens with paper palette. The next thing is colors, of course. You can use your favorite palette, pens, half pens, or tubes, or whatsoever you like better. I almost forgot about pencil for drawing, sure. And the main ingredient in our watercolor kitchen is water, but I also recommend you to have on hand a spray. You can make your painting without it, but it's really a helpful thing because it helps you add water during the process easier than you do it with brush. But well, it's up to you again. The next thing is paper towel or napkins to absorb extra water. Better to have somewhere near. Usually we need it urgent. And the last very important thing is hair dryer. Of course, I don't use it on plein air working, but in studio it's better to use it to avoid waiting 2 hours between 2 steps of your watercolor process. So just dry your work a bit and then continue with next step. So I think we are ready. We have all we need, and let's move on. So we've got ready to start working. There is a sheet of watercolor paper now, and usually I use half of standard watercolor sheet. Size is 38 by 56 centimeters. If we are drawing on plein air, we look at beautiful nature or picturesque landscape, but when we are in studio, we use references. As I usually say, the references has no such a big significance to me. I need it only to recover some details. For example, now you can see 2 references. They belong to the same place. Photo was shot at a different time of the day. Neither of them will be used precisely, but my future composition is going to be based on both of them. This reference I need to the vibe of the painting. It keeps the atmosphere, beautiful evening sky. It is almost the sunset, the end of the day. And this one I'm going to use to recover details. There is the fountain on the first reference, but we cannot see it clear. It's quite impossible to distinguish any details or even proportions. A few words about a composition. There are some rules about plotting the composition, but it doesn't mean that they are strict. Mind you, rules exist to help us, not to disturb. Let me say they are kind of recommendations, which help us better express our idea. So to speak, mostly we follow the rule, and it helps us make our artwork more interesting, especially during the plein air, where we have to work faster, and to avoid boring composition, we are plotting it accordingly to these recommendations. Let me show the example. Here we see a fontaine, a group of sculpture. The fontaine is right at the center of the photo. Everything is too symmetrical. We can repeat it, of course, on our drawing, but it's too boring. Unless we want to create a portrait of the fontaine. In this case, it will be an architectural rendering. Well, to make our artwork interesting, we are going to use those recommendations. There are the golden sections, or we also call it the divine proportion, which teach us of visual representation of fine proportions. Also, it goes about some key point, best place for object and whatever. For example, mostly we never dispose the horizon line in the center of the sheet of paper. We do it higher or lower. The best way to do it is to divide the sheet vertically into 3 parts, and the same for horizon. On the reference, the fontaine is exactly in the middle. Divided the surface into 3 parts, we've got the better position for the main object. We are disposing it left or right of the center. So we've got 4 key points. That means we can place the horizon line here and the fontaine left. At the background we are drawing the palace, park, whatever. It's the first option, according to rules of plotting composition. You may ask why it's better and what is so special about it. When we give our spectators an opportunity to travel inside our artwork, it makes our painting much more interesting. We create a small story in flat surface. The space appears when we scrutinize the artwork. In that exact moment, when our glance slips from air to details. I guess many of you notice some help lines when you turn on a camera on your smartphone. It is a guidelines. In this way, any person who has never studied art can use these classic rules of composition in everyday life, even if he doesn't notice it. Well, in my smartphone there are these guidelines, and they are then to help whoever make interesting shots. The main object is our fontaine or portrait or selfie, whatever, is placed on one of this key point, the place where lines crossed. Okay, let's back to our composition. I'm going to explain how and why we can make a few steps from the rules. In my opinion, we can improve the first composition, make it more beautiful, because in the first one we have too much empty space. There is a middle of our sheet of paper and I'm about to raise the skyline above the middle, but make it lower than guideline. I want to leave more space for water. Here there is an edge of our fontaine. From this edge the water basin starts, and reflections will play a big role in the painting. Time and again, I divide this square into 3 parts, and here again I want to make a step from the rule. I'm not going to place the statue right in the guideline. I move it closer to the center, but not in the center. So to speak, I have changed the classic recommendation because I want to express my vision of that exact composition better. There is only one main object in whole picture, and I think there is no reason to place it on the very edge. It is not an accidental guest in our painting. It is a central piece. So here will be a sculpture group, then the edge of the water basin, and this place we have 4 reflections. The beautiful evening sky and the fountain itself will be reflected on the calm surface of the water. On the background we will draw the palace and park. It will up a horizon line a bit. As you can see, it is very close to the first composition. The rest of it is for the sky. Please take a look at both types of composition. When you compare them, they have many in common. In some we adhere to the rules but change them in a more favorable direction for us. In my humble opinion, it is a better option. I would like to emphasize one more time that the plotting of composition doesn't depend on references that we have. I always prefer to plot a composition myself. References help me with details only. Okay, let's go the plotting on a large scale. The photo with evening sky I put aside. I needed more for the work in color, and reference with details I recommend to have on hand. The most important thing here is the sketch. Better to have it somewhere near. It has the main idea. We have already developed the composition and we need to repeat it on a bigger scale. We begin from horizon line. As I have taught, we should find the center of the sheet of paper. Roughly we divide it into 3 parts, and according to our plan, we make horizon line higher than the center but lower than the first guideline. And the same for vertical line. Divided into 3 parts. Between the center and left guideline, we place the sculpture group. Please pay your attention. All lines we draw really slightly. We don't push the pencil, barely touching the paper. Usually I do not use eraser. I use kneadable art eraser. It allows me delete pencil softly with no harm to paper surface. Opposite to standard eraser that causes damage to surface. Actually, you can draw this line using ruler. It's okay, but it works only for studio. When you go to the plein air, it is more common to draw without any ruler, because it will be just faster. That's why it is better to know how to draw without ruler. But as you can see, it's not easy peasy to make a straight line by the hand. I'm going to share a way how to do it easier. To do this, we use the improvised tools. Usually our sheet of paper is fixed on some flat and straight surface. For example, I use my plexiglass. It has straight edges. On a sheet of paper I already outlined it where I need my lines, and now I'm just about to draw them smoother. Okay, it's some kind of life hack. I'm going to use my hand as a lever. With the little finger or the edge of the palm, we lean against the even edge of our surface, plexiglass, pad, whatever. Depends on the surface you use. Our hand leans against the edge of that surface and we move the hand along it. The pencil on my hand repeats the movement and draw the straight line. Mind you, do not push on the pencil. The same procedure we repeat for the next guideline. Yeah, it can be challenging. I have to stretch out my hand as much as possible. Nice, we've got guidelines. Now we can continue drawing slightly. We are plotting the composition with no pressure on pencil. I start from the very top, the roof of the palace on the background. It is a line where building line touch the sky. Higher will be only the head of Neptune, the monument. At the beginning we draw all things slightly, in case we will need to change something or fix a mistake. When we are sure that everything is fine, then we will start to draw details. So the main part of the drawing is done, and I have a little left to do. I should draw reflections. You could notice that there are no reflections on my references, but don't worry. If we manage to plot the composition, we are able to add reflections easily. Oh, right now I noticed that I made a mistake. Well, it's a good opportunity to show how we can correct it. Now the line of the fountain border is too low, and it is on the same level as the sculpture group. Using the kneadable art eraser, I delete wrong drawing. The art eraser absorbs drawing, that's why it is important to draw with no pressure at all. That's how we can correct mistakes or make some change with no harming paper. There is no reason to delete the drawing completely. Let it be as a slight reminding of previous step. When we start working with watercolor, it will be covered. In fact, you can make the drawing more precise. You can plot it with a ruler. It will be beautiful too. Sometimes it's even better create a drawing with a ruler. For those people who think that it is bad to use a ruler, I have counter-argument why it can be good. The thing is that for the watercolor wet and wet, it is enough to have a fast sketch drawing. Since it's going to be a quick work, I don't need a lot of details. But some drawing we can develop further. And more proper details, we can draw each window, but it's up to you. Even now you can see some disadvantages of freehand drawing. While I'm drawing, I gradually smear the drawing with my hand. Some details have disappeared already, despite my effort to be careful. Because of the smeared graphite, some dirt is formed. Maybe you can't see it through the camera, but it is here. But when you line up a drawing with a ruler, you make it more accurate and clear. The question why we are not allowed to use ruler while we are studying is quite obvious. We learn how to control our hand and eyes, how to be independent of auxiliary tools. That's why teachers ask students avoid using rulers, especially when you go on plein air. There we just have no time to use it. Imagine you draw the same plot from nature. It will be difficult to work on the street with ruler. So it is preferable to know drawing without auxiliary tools, but don't forget to use it on purpose. It's just a tool and it gives us some benefits. In order to plot a reflection and understand what exactly will be reflected, you need to keep in mind a couple of simple rules. We are going to start from the background. If the water line starts here, it doesn't mean that we should draw the reflection of whole palace from this line. In case with background, we tied everything to horizon line. We take the part of the palace above the horizon line and measure the same distance under the line of horizon. We try to save proportions. Thus, the reflection of the roof of the palace will be roughly located here. We don't need to draw the roof line while we have on this place other object, fontaine and reflection of fontaine. But we have the roof line in our imagination while we are drawing the rest part of the reflection, which we can see here. We outline only the main details to emphasize the mirror effect, the beginning of a new part of building, the age of roof. Each time we check the horizon line and repeat the dimensions. We create that mirror effect. We plot the object in the reversed order. Strictly keep all vertical line. And we continue, roof again. We measure the distance to the horizon and the same amount from the horizon down. It is nice to add a few details as a chimney or window or roof or tile direction, whatever. Our palace reflection in gradually out of visible part of water basin. And now finally the palace become interlined. Just a few details can be noticed. Here the building is hidden by a curved line of basin, side of fountain and its reflection. We repeat the same for the left part of fountain, the roof, the horizon, the roof, or on the surface of water. And next we go to the reflection of closest object. Let's start with cone-shaped trees. They are closer to the water. To draw the reflection of the tree, we need to find its basis. Keep in mind we do not use the horizon line here. We use the bottom of the object. In the case of the background, it's different because the palace is placed almost on horizon line and it is so far. So we measure the height of the tree from the base and measure the same amount down. Here we will have the top of the tree reflected in the water. Very important to keep the vertical line correctly. In the reflection we again see not the whole tree but only a part. The rest is hidden by the reflection of the side of the fountain. The reflection won't repeat the shape for 100% because the surface of the water never be absolutely flat. It moves slightly in any case. Now we repeat the same for the tree on the right side. Base, vertical, mark the top of the tree on the surface of the water. To do the reflection more real, it's better to pay more attention to detail. For example, this is a small branch on this tree which lined aside from the whole shape. It's nice to repeat the detail on the reflection. You don't need, of course, to be very precise. It's more about emphasize the illusion. Our brain itself will complete the correct picture. It just needs a small hint. Exactly according to the same way, we will draw a reflection of the main object. There is no need to pay much attention to the details here. We are interested in the silhouette only. We find the base, measure the height, and find the correct location of the top on the water. And from this point, from this reflection of the head of the monument, I will build the silhouette in reverse, upside down. Even in sculpture group we have such a few details, almost none. Since it is an evening, the fountain is in shade. The sunlight is only on the palace. And some of the sun's rays touch the sculpture of Neptune. In general, it will be the dark silhouette. That's the reason why we don't need to draw details properly. And in the reflection, details will not remain at all. It will be kind one-piece silhouette. Our only task is to repeat the silhouette of the fountain on the water surface. So, the watercolor drawing is ready. I added fountain stream. In the process of working with watercolors, we need to remember about them and leave them white. Jets of water at the point of contact with the surface of the water create a little chaos. This chaos creates movement on the surface of the water and destroys reflection a bit. At the very last moment, I decided to add this difficult detail into artwork, so we can practice leaving unpainted areas. It's not easy even for me to remember to stop my brush in very exact moment. And now we can clean the jets of the fountain with eraser. It is a rare occasion when I use it. When the plotting is finished, we can delete extra strokes in details. But don't do it everywhere, so not to harm the surface of paper. So, on the example of a classical composition, we built our own, where I showed how we can use the rules and deviate from them. The picture is our own world, which we create ourselves. Look at the references one more time. You see? None of them was used exactly. It gives us a freedom of choice. We don't need to be a hostage of one exact photo shoot. We don't need to repeat it. Easily we can choose the most impressive angle, create the plot, use our imagination and express our ideas. That's why I always say that I create my own reality. Yeah, it's based on real places, but it is my game and my rules. It also can be called an illusion, despite the fact that the viewer recognizes the place. And do not be afraid to make mistakes. It is more important to keep the vibe of the place. So, our drawing is ready and it's time to start paint. I attach here the final list of watercolor paints that I used to create this artwork. It's not necessary to use the same exact brands, but for those of you who are interested in what exact palette of colors I used, it's the most precise synopsis. Our drawing for watercolor is ready, and we can start paint with watercolor. Before we start, we need to prepare the sheet of paper properly. What we need for this? We need a plexiglass, our paper of course, clear water and white brush. It is advisable that the brush is soft, for example an artificial squirrel, because it absorbs more water. What we should do to prepare the sheet of paper for painting? Look at this. There are two sides of sheet. Front side, that where our drawing is, and back side. The side with drawing we keep dry. Despite we call this technique the watercolor wet on wet, the main idea is that front side is still dry. Why so? It is the only way to control the combination of colors, borders, and stop them in time. If we wet this side, we won't be able to control borders. One color will blend into another and we won't be able to follow our drawing. Sure, sometimes it gives us a beautiful effect and we do allow colors flow into each other time to time on purpose. We will use that effect to make our painting more vivid and beautiful. So we take our sheet of paper and turn it over with the drawing and put it face down on the glass. The glass must be dry and clean. Now the spray will help us to wet the back surface of paper. As I have told, it's optional, but it's better if you have it. The spray allows us to wet the surface of the paper evenly. To speed up the wetting process, the only spray is not enough. While the sheet of paper absorbs water, its start waving and some water flows into the formed lowlands. It looks like a puddle. So now we moisten the slightly sprayed paper with water generously using brush. Now we need some time until the paper picks up the water, absorb it. When it happens, the sheet of paper becomes straight and relaxed, become perfectly flat. How long does it take? Well, it depends on many things. For example, how humid it is indoors or outdoors, the place where you paint. For example, it's almost always very difficult to paint at the sunset. Of course, it's very beautiful, but the air becomes so humid and the paper hardly dries. Sometimes you need to add more water to the paper. Watch for dry areas on the surface. It is a sign that it is time to add water. To sum up, the whole preparation can take about 5 minutes or 10 or 15 minutes. It also depends on thickness of the paper. As I told, I use 300 gram. I would say it is a golden mean, but 600 gram will absorb water longer time, and less than 300 gram, on the contrary, it will get wet faster, but it will also dry faster. When the paper gets wet, it's time to double check that you have everything you need on hand. We have already prepared and used clear water and spray. Let's check others, like colors. I usually use this time to lay out the tools in a convenient way, put paper towels or napkins closer, check that hair dryer is connected to electricity and everything works. So the time has come and our paper is ready. How can we understand it? The paper becomes perfectly flat. It seems relaxed. There are no waves, no curves on its surface. It is saturated with water and completely wet. Gently, we take our sheet of paper by the corner, we lift it up and turn it face up and gently apply it to the glass. Now our drawing is on right place again. Here you can see that some water has flowed onto the front side, but don't worry, there is nothing to worry about. It's time for paper towels. Take a napkin and carefully place it on the surface of the paper. With light movements, we remove extra water from the surface. At the same moment, we press a sheet of paper closer to the glass and excess water comes out. The stronger the paper is pressed to the glass, the better it will be fixed on it, and we can work longer without adding water. Gradually the paper will dry out and come off the glass and will bend back. We just need to add water to the back side of surface time to time. Okay, now the paper looks like glued to the glass, but of course we don't use any glue, it's just water. we are ready to start painting. If you gently touch the surface of the paper with your palm of hand, you will feel that the paper is damp, and at the same time the surface is quite dry. It's kinda borderline state. While the paper was absorbing moisture, I prepared my colors for the sky. Today I've chosen cerulean blue. It is by Grumbacher company. I really like this color. But in fact, of course, you can take any sky blue color. It could be royal blue, horizon blue, whatever. I just wanted to take it today. It's one of my favorite colors for the sky. The second color for the sky that I prepared is a mixture of John Brilliant 558 by Shinhunt and one more John Brilliant 557. It's also Shinhan company. Since this will be an evening sky, the clouds will be colored warmly by the sun. In the evening before the sunset, the clouds are still light but no longer white. These colors help to create the warm tone of clouds. A few words about these colors. They contain a lot of white pigment. Because of this, the paint becomes thicker, which is beneficial to use in combination with blue. As you may know, if we take just yellow, it will mix with blue and turn into green. But we don't need green in the sky. Due to the white pigment, the density of this yellow and sky blue is different, and they will mix less. This is a way how we can avoid green. And I must say, don't be afraid using paint with high content of white pigment. Almost all blue colors have a lot of them. But this doesn't prevent us from using them, right? The paint remains transparent. Also for the sky, I've prepared royal blue and paint gray. To be honest, they are always in my palette. I often use them. We will need them for dark part of clouds. And we also need a tiny amount of violet. I use Windsor violet, but it can be any. My advice: since we have both warm and cold colors in the sky, I recommend using two brushes, to warm and cold. It's better to work with two brushes at the same time, so not to waste time cleaning the brush, and to avoid dirt for sure. It's time to start. I'm going to paint the clouds at first. Let's form a shape of light part of clouds. As you can see, the color doesn't spread everywhere. It keeps shape. And we have enough time to think about the shape of the clouds, how to arrange them more beautifully. We don't need to hurry. We can choose the best composition. We have time before the paint is fixed. It will remain mobile longer than it would be on a dry sheet of paper. The sheet is damp and the moisture is kept inside thanks to the glass. Here we have quite a bit of clear sky. We paint it with any sky blue. I use cerulean blue. In this place where the line of clear sky and the white cloud touch, be careful. I hardly touch the neighboring color. Only in some places I combine blue with yellow and let them mix. But somewhere I leave the white edge of the cloud, which adds thickness and volume to it. the edge of the sky is always darker. To make it darker, I add Prussian blue to the sky color. This effect is explained by physics. The thickness of the atmosphere through which we look at the sky is naturally thinner at the top than at the horizon. On the horizon, we look through a quite considerable thickness of the atmosphere. Because of this, the color of the sky above us seems darker. Now let's move on to the dark part of the sky. These are clouds. Thickened clouds are darker than the sky, but it doesn't mean that we will draw them very dark. I'm about to use this mix. I take royal blue, then I add into it Payne's gray and a little drop of violet. Keep in mind, the mix has to be heavily diluted with water. We've got a relatively warm color and start painting clouds. Please notice, when I'm painting the dark part of the cloud, I don't leave a white line on the paper. I let the edges of colors touch each other and blend cloud with the sky. In place where the thickness of the cloud is thicker, we add more dark color, since the sun hardly penetrates through the cloud. If the sheet of paper were dry, then by this point the sky would have drawn earlier and we couldn't add a new color so easily. Since we are painting the sky in light colors, and it will be the lightest part of the picture, we can safely paint it through the monument, because object on the ground will be much more darker than the sky. We've painted the sky, but you can still work with the white that we left at the very beginning. Actually, you can leave it as it is, but in my opinion it turns into too torn edge, and I want to soften this white outline. For this, I will work with the clean, damp brush. To smooth the outline, you just need to carefully touch with the brush in some places. The palace will be slightly darker than the sky, but we will paint it later. A clear brush with water is enough for this job. First, we are going to smooth the outline so that the transition from the sky to the palace won't be too sharp. The first task is to finish the sky, or rather to paint the reflection of the sky in the water. You may ask why we always start from the sky. Because usually it is the lightest part of the composition. You can always paint something darker, yeah? But if we draw something too dark, then it can be fixed. So we soften the color with water, but you can add a little cold color. Since the roof reflects the cold color of the sky, I'm going to repeat the colors of the sky. It was paint gray and cerulean blue. We draw the roof with a slight carelessness. Somewhere we allow the colors to connect, and somewhere we leave a thin outline of white, part of the roof as it is illuminated by the rays of setting sun. Again, it's all about emphasize volume. The roof is the lightest part of the building. We will add some shadows later. We continue the same with the building. It has a warm color. For this I take warm grey by Sennelier. It is a quite unusual color. Look at this. And it will be the main basis warm color. We apply this color immediately after the roof layer. We allow these two colors to mix freely. This way we get a soft edge again. We still draw it freely right through our sculpture group again. Next, the only thing to do with caution is to bypass the jets of water from the fountain. We try do not touch them with the brush and leave them as wide as possible. Here we see how the colors blend quite nicely. We do not focus on the building very much. This is a background. It is far away and exists separately. We'll draw green later, so now we just continue to cover the drawing. But we no longer take color on the brush and continue with clean water. We do it through all details, exact before the line of fountain streams. When working with fine details, such a simple tool helps a lot. I call it the magic wand, which is actually called mushtabel. This thing is a really helpful one. The simple tool is needed to support the hand. The support point rises above the desktop and doesn't touch the surface of the work. So we can rest our hand on the mushtabel and work on the details. We continue to draw on top of the line drawing. Now we do not pay any attention to the sculpture, the fountain, the greenery, only jets of water stop us. We work only with the general background and soften the borders of the fields. Well, what we have done? We call it stretch of color. I'm not sure that it is a good word, let me say it is a gradient. We took the color of the building to nowhere, so that we do not have sharp borders when it dries. The sharp border at the top, the roof, are okay. The rather sharp hits of the rays of the sun, as I said. Then the rest of the composition gradually fades into the shadows. Now we start to paint the water. To tell the truth, we are going to paint a reflection of the sky in the water of the fountain. we can say that we will draw the sky a second time. Before the start to paint reflection in color, I first gently wet the space from the fountain jets down with water. Even when the surface of the water is smooth and appears to be completely mirror-like, the color of the water is a tone or two darker than the color of the sky. It comes from the fact that the light pours from the sky. The sky gives us light. And yeah, we are going to paint the sky reflected in the water in 2 steps. When the paint dries, it became lighter and it's very difficult to immediately find the right tone. Therefore, in the first layer we work on the sky pattern, and in the second layer we add tone and an effect of water movement. So, the sky number 2. I repeat, we use the same colors, but in different proportions. Clear sky will no longer be just cerulean blue, but with the addition of Payne's gray, it will make it darker. We paint the sky on top of the fountain reflection. We are ignoring this figure for now, because this whole part will be silhouette and it will be much darker. We are done with the lightest part. Now we need to give some time to the paper so that it dries. Now the sheet of paper is too wet, and if we start painting something on top, the colors will spread as if now happening in a piece of the sky. But in this part it's okay. This effect plays directly into our aim, because it is water and there will be no sharp reflection on its surface. Usually the reflection of the sky is soft, even I would say blurry. If you slightly touch the paper with your palm here, you will feel that the surface is saturated with moisture. Most often we use a hairdryer to dry the surface of the paper, but in this case I do not recommend using a hairdryer. Why so? Now the colors haven't fixed yet. The pigment continues moving imperceptibly to the eye. Gradually the transition of colors becomes softer and softer. If we dry the paper with a hairdryer now, it will instantly fix the pigment, and beautiful changes won't happen. I usually use this waiting time to wash my brushes, change the water, wash my ceramic palette, and some other stuff. Besides, I prefer to use clean tools to avoid dirt. When we mix in too many pigments at once, the color became muddy. So Now we have a pause. During the pause, the colors are drying and the pigment are fixing themselves, and I would say in a more beautiful and soft way. Now our sheet of paper has dried naturally. How to define it? The part that we painted last, the reflection in the water, has stopped glaring. It means that the paper has dried enough to continue working, and the colors will remain in the same place as we see it now. You can also touch this part again with your hand to determine if it is dry enough. Sure, this understanding will only come with experience. Practice a little and soon you will begin to understand when you can continue and when you don't. Even if you made a mistake and incorrectly determined the state of the paper, it isn't scary. In the process, if you see that the paint is spreading, you just stop work and dry the paper with a hairdryer. And the next part is tonal relationship is the background. I'm talking about the palace. The palace will be slightly darker, but we don't see that in the reference. One photo was taken during the day, and in this case the palace is even lighter than the sky. It is completely illuminated by the sun. Well, yeah, sometimes the sky is not the brightest part of the picture. The second photo is closer to what we need, but there is too much contrast here. This is a common photo effect. The earth against the background almost turned it into a dark monolith. Of course, in real life, the color ratio is much softer. Our task for now is to restore the live image. I quite like the color of the roof on the right. Dark colors emphasize the shape of the roof. The roof was exposed due to this. But on the left, the roof almost completely aligns with the sky. In reality, it may be true, but it's better to make the roof darker. I'm about to concentrate the color of the building from the roof and continue with the building in sequence. No matter how fractional the building is, you need to remember that in the background it turns into a single mass. Yes, there are many architectural details, but they almost merge into one. We will only give a hint of their existence. For the roof, I use the same colors as last time, royal blue and Payne's gray, a little more blue, the color of the sky reflecting of the roof. The roof itself is light gray, so its surface can reflect surrounding colors more strongly. This is the option of all light colors. I draw the roof carefully according the border on the top edge and don't care about the bottom edge. I ignore the trees and the garden. At the same time, I look at how the paint behaves. It doesn't spread over the surface and allows me to observe a clear edge. This means that the surface has dried sufficiently. I keep ignoring the trees, the sculpture. It will all be darker than the roof. Thanks to the transparency of the watercolor, the texture from previous layer are preserved. We can add a new texture and lines. The beauty of watercolor is in its complexity. This helps create the effect of depth. I like the right side of the roof in terms of tone and color, but in order to avoid a sharp transition, it's better to continue painting smoothly. For example, add a roof pattern slightly. Then we move on to the building itself. We draw walls. To do this, I again take warm gray. I would say this color summarizes the details of the building well. It is located between the yellow color of the building walls and the white architectural elements like pilasters, columns, and others. This is a good background color. We will add details later. We continue painting the walls of the building without waiting for the roof to dry, for a smooth transition again. And again we paint ignoring the garden, greenery, trees, put color on top of all of it. The lower we move toward the base of the building, the darker we draw it. This is due to the fact that the building is gradually plunging into the shadow. I add into warm gray, warm sepia, so I make a gradient from light to dark, from top to bottom, ignoring trees. But I do pay attention to the jets of water and try to stop my brush in time. Except the jets of the fountain, I add colors through the entire drawing. But this line I blur with water, since there shouldn't be any sharp lines in this place. The next piece we stop at is this facade of the building. This part of the facade faces us, and one wall becomes much lighter. We just leave this wall like this. While the facade dries up, we will work on the lawn and paths. This ground line will be much darker. Until we add green, we work only with the color of the earth. For this I take warm sepia and burnt sienna. Burnt sienna will add some reddish hue into paths because they made from sand. The only care that we will be required in working on this part of the drawing is to keep the light line of the edge of the pool and the jet of the fountain. On the reference, the line of the pool is almost invisible, but it is better to emphasize its presence. This will emphasize the volume and space. Now let's draw the side of the fountain itself. In the original, the side of the fountain is white, but since it is already dark and this part of the landscape is immersed in shadow, our white turned into gray. Due to the fact that we applied layer after layer and didn't wait for the previous color to dry, we have soft transition everywhere. Nevertheless, each color is in its place. The next step is details and shadows. And to continue working, we need to completely dry the surface. But this time we won't wait for natural drying, and we are going to use a hairdryer. What has happened to us after using the hairdryer? Our sheet of paper is dry enough and it has unstuck from the glass. It could have happened before, but this almost always happens after using a hairdryer. Carefully, we fold the sheet of paper and gradually, with the help of spray, we moisten the back side of the sheet. We also add a bit water to the surface itself. After a few minutes, the paper will absorb the water again and will straight out. We can repeat this procedure many times, as many as we need, even if we work on a big artwork for 2 or 3 days. Good cotton paper won't suffer, believe me. And yes, you can add water with a brush, all actions are identical, but with a brush it doesn't work as evenly as it does with a spray. So, details and shadows. There are almost no shadows in the first reference. Only some architectural elements are underlined by a shadow. On the second reference, the shadows are too contrasting. We will repeat them, but we will do it much softer, in order not to crush the harmony of the background. Let's take a smaller brush and again work with the same colors. And maybe more ultramarine could be added. And Payne's Gray. We got a darker tone of the cold shadow. And now the same for the building itself. We do not need to wait for complete drying. I mix warm sepia with yellow ochre At this stage we can already soften the touch with greens. To do this, take a clean brush with water and blur the edge of the color. Now you can afford yourself to add more details to the light areas of the building. I use a mix of maple yellow dip, and yellow ochre, and I make it a bit less vivid with warm sepia. On those parts of the building where the sun's rays fall, the yellow color of the walls will be more active. We don't need to repeat the whole drawing, we are just play a little with color. These fragments will create the illusion of the yellow walls of the building with the drawing that we see from afar. We don't really peer into the details, they are too far away. We take in just a hint. Where the sunlight is bright, the details are more accurate. In the shade, it's enough to add a couple of random spots. The surface of the building itself is broken up into an architectural pattern, and we allude to this pattern. It looks like a flicker of light and color, barely perceptible to our eyes. To continue working, we again need to dry the surface of the sheet. After that, we will finalize the details of the background and draw the greenery of the park. Here again we need a hairdryer. After using the hairdryer, we again have to moisten the paper. We repeat all the same steps that we did last time. Now we take a very tiny brush, which helps us to draw windows. The windows on the building are the darkest part, but in the photo they are all the same color. But in reality it looks different. As we move through space, any glass surface comes to life. Well, light reflects, plays on the surface. Using this effect gives us more life to drawing. From this point of view, photography has some disadvantages comparing to the fine art. The photo is static, but when we are moving in space, we see the flickering of glass. I'm not going to paint the windows too dark in case not to ruin the background, to maintain the integrity. We continue to paint the details with hints. We don't need to be precise. For the window color, I use Payne's Gray. You can arrange a play of color with only one paint. Make it darker, lighter. There is an endless variety of shades. And if we add blue sky or royal blue, we will imitate the reflected sky. Then the color game will become even richer. We need just a few touches of different shades and the effect is achieved. It's not even necessary to draw every window, just set the rhythm. The yellow color of the walls, a white elements and a couple of dots of windows are all we need to create the illusion. The palace is ready. The next step is greens. Almost the entire garden is in the shade, but it's better to emphasize the volume with light and dark, so that the trees do not turn into cardboard decorations. The greens will be much darker than what we have already drawn. It is usually one of the darkest elements in any landscape. In our case, of course, only the reflection of the fountain and its silhouette will be darker. Well, actually, you can use any green color. It doesn't play a big role in this work. For the first layer, I'll take sap green and raw umber. Evening trees don't really look green at all. It's more brown with a green tint. I'll add into the mix warm sepia. It will take my color thicker, denser and darker. When we paint greenery, we should only pay attention to the stream of the fountain. Now, when all layers have dried up, it has become better to see how the jets of the fountain stand out against the background on the entire landscape. They have not been covered with any layers of paint and retain the white color of the paper. As you see, this effect can be achieved without using of masking fluid. I just try to be careful and stop the brush in time. But keep in mind, to be too careful is also a bad thing. In this case, the water jet will turn into smooth metal handrail. To draw along, add English green. It is a color of fresh grass color. But since it is in the shade, we will add more ultramarine. The left side of the lawn will be even darker. There is no sun at all. I will make it the color thicker with warm sepia. While the paint on the trees is still wet, we'll add the trunks. We will mix the color based on the same greens, only make them darker, with warm sepia and Payne's grey. Continuing to draw with hints, we add tree trunks. This little detail is important. The trees are tied to the ground and the palace is visible through the trunks. But again, we are not drawing a forest. A few dashes are enough for us. While the first layer of green dries before finishing, we can complete the pool line. Before that, we painted it in grey, but it was light grey because it was the top of the edge. And now, to add a volume, we are going to paint the vertical wall of the basin with darker grey color. I recommend taking a clean brush to avoid unnecessary shades. I use a mix again, Payne's grey and ultramarine, to create a cold grey. Be careful with this detail. The side of the fountain has a rounded shape, and in this place the surface turns toward the light. Imagine that this is a cylinder from the inside. In general, in real life, the gradient is presented on everything. Objects live and interact with each other. Light reflects off surfaces. The color of one object affects the color of another. Now, while the previous color hasn't yet fixed, it's better to immediately draw a reflection to get a soft line of transition from the border of the pool to the water. Since this is the closest detail and it is a light detail, so the reflection will be also quite light. We will make it just a couple of tones darker than the border of the fountain itself. I take the same colors, Payne's grey and ultramarine, but I make them tighter. That is to say, I add less water. In this place we have a destruction of the reflection. This is due to the ripples on the water which will roll around at the point where the jet of the fountain touches the surface of the water. While we were painting the side of the fountain basin, the paint on the trees have dried up enough. This means that we can complete the background. To do this, we need to put the final touches, add volume to the trees. I'll take the color which we already used for the first layer and add to them Payne's green and ultramarine. So we get a denser and colder green. Rather, you can call this color grey with greenish tint. While we were painting the background, our water had dried up too. There are even bubbles here. they sometimes appear, it's okay. You can simply gently fold the edge of the sheet and stick it to the glass again. Now it's right time to finish work with water. After the surface has completely dried, we can add second layer. We will start with the reflection of the palace, which will be very light. Then we continue to draw a gradient from light to dark, repeating the effect with the sky. As I said, the sky above is darker than towards the horizon. We see the same thing in reflection. The gradient will be light enough, it is just a nuance, but it adds a depth. Let's start with the reflection of the palace. It will be a light gray color, darker than the tone of the palace itself, and colder in hue. But the reflection of the palace will be lighter than the reflection of the side of the fountain. This is a reflection of a distant object and it cannot attract too much attention to itself. I have mixed previous colors, warm sepia, warm gray, and Payne's gray. These are the same colors that we have used for the palace, but in a different proportion. While we are painting, don't forget that part of the reflection is destroyed by the ripples that come from fountain jet. Because this reflection is light, we can draw it straight through the sculpture group. And here it's nice to add gold to the roof, as well as on the building itself, but it's darker. Oops! Now I have touched a little on the stream of water. This little mistake is easy to fix. I take a paper napkin and touch with it the wrong place. Now we take clean water and deep cup to make more of the desired color. And we need a bigger brush. Now with clean water we start washing. We paint with a brush with water only, without color, the upper part of the reflection. Sometimes we touch the previous layer, the reflection of palace, just to soften edge a bit. Pay your attention. It is important that the brush is very soft, so as not to damage the first watercolor layer. I have a round brush made of artificial squirrel. If it were not so much small details, the jets of the fountain, a wide brush could be ideal. Now add a light essence of Payne's gray to clean water. It will be a very light tone, which we will increase gradually. Continuing the drawing, add this light tone to the place where there was just water, mix it with water layer, then we increase the shade again and continue to paint. It is a way how we gradually create a gradient in watercolor. When we first painted the reflection of the sky, our task was to recreate the drawing of the sky. Now, having made a watercolor washing with gradient, we can further develop the surface of the water. Here I have a little extra moisture. It is better to remove it with a paper towel, otherwise it will be absorbed into the edge of the sheet and push the pigment away. Then we may have some streaks. Now let's add a slight wave to the surface of the water. The water surface is never perfectly smooth. In addition, we have fountain jets that create movement. The ripples from them will be only in the point of contact, and then it will turn into a very slight movement on the surface of the water. We make it slightly. It gives some nature to our painting. With the first touch, we create only a hint. You can see how the paint spreads quickly, forming a very soft spot. Then we add paint again and again and again in the same place until we like the result. While the paint is spreading in different directions, we can correct the shape and direction of the wave. It's better to let waves dry on their own, without high dryer, as we did the first time after drawing the reflection. So the shape will be as soft as possible, and we will have an opportunity to check the intensity of the color and maybe add some color if it is needed. We've painted the sky, water, reflection, worked out the background. Now finally it's time to go to the main object, the fountain itself. And here the most difficult thing is to decide what color we need. At first glance, the color of bronze with green stains, streaks seems elusive, but our task is easier than it seems. If it was a sunny day, then yes, we would have two variety, but we are in the evening, so the sculpture group turns into the silhouette. We have only one tiny exception. The topmost part of the fountain, the statue of Neptune, is slightly illuminated by the sun. Only here we will have some light and shadow. As for the color, I would say that it's rather gray, like everything that is in the shade. In light space, the gray will turn into ochre, and somewhere we will have an intense green. Here on my palette there is the very color that we need. This is a coincidence, this mix was left after working on the background. Well, so I take warm sepia and add to it indigo. I would say this is a faster way to a dark gray color with a hint of green. The first layer we draw is not too dark, but dark enough, since the silhouette is the darkest figure in our picture. But even this figure should have volume, darker places. We should create a figure in space and not as a flat cardboard decoration. It's better to take a thinner brush and another one even thinner. We are going to paint again in two brushes. Warm areas where light hits and cold areas the bulk of the silhouette. Let's get started. Make sure that the surface is dry enough. I'm talking about the front surface, of course. The leaf itself certainly remain wet. This moisture is maintained from back side. So we are working in two brushes. Light, shadow, yellow, green. It's not always possible to accurately determine the desired moisture of the sheet. To prevent thin details from blurring, we dry the paper with the hairdryer again. And as always, after using a hairdryer, add moisture to the back of the sheet. Perhaps this is the only part of the work where we have to be careful. Accurately and clearly draw small details. In this place, without waiting for the statue to dry, we continue to draw the base of the statue. It's made of the stone and has a different color. It is slightly lighter than the bronze, and in the shade it turns out an interesting reddish mix. We continue to apply paint, blurring the line of contrast between bronze and stone, and we do remember about the streams of water. Leave them unpainted. Like all objects, the base of the statue has a gradient. It gets darker towards the bottom. The sun, as we remember, only at the very top. The lower, the thicker the shadow. And we continue to draw the sculpture group at the bottom. There is no sun here anymore, and we don't need to paint with two brushes. We use only the gray-green color of bronze. Now we are interested in the reflection of the fountain in the mirror of water. In addition to the main reflection, we also have the reflection of the trees. The reflection will be an absolute silhouette. It will have neither volume nor details. It will be a dark, cold grey color. I use again Payne's grey and ultramarine. And here too we have to be sure that the surface is dry. The reflection of nearby objects on a smooth water surface has very clear boundaries. At this point we again remember about ripples on the water. It is created from the jet of the fountain. And also the very touch of the side of the fountain and the water should be emphasized with the dark line, because in this place the wall of the fountain is saturated with moisture. In this place the reflection is also destroyed. Another jet of the fountain goes beyond the edge of the sheet. We don't see the touch, but we remember about it. Now let's move on to the main reflection. We continue to draw in the same way. Somewhere the silhouette will be destroyed by the waves. We have the very final touch. To do this, dry the surface of the paper. The third thing we do is complete the work on the water. I'm talking about fountain streams. Throughout the work we try to leave them unpainted. But the jet of the fountain also has volume and cannot be for 100% wide. It is moving and reflects surrounding objects. Therefore, we have to draw this volume. It will be a very light tone, light gray color. You can add more sky blue to it. For example, in this way. We do not cover this element completely with paint, just a little touch. This jet is in motion, the shape has a torn edge. The same goes for the other elements of water. Now that we have everything painted, we can improve the picture. After we have clearly defined light and dark places, we can clearly see when something is missing. For example, now it is obvious that the line of the earth should be darker, more massive. It is in the shadow completely under the trees, much more denser than that we see now. By making it darker, we emphasize the horizon and separate the foreground from the background. This is very easy to do. Right on top, we cover a layer of darker paint. I do this, I use mix of warm sepia and burnt sienna. We have already used this mix when we were covering the first layer. Gradually, right on the top of the previous drawing, I add a new one. The sense of space becomes stronger when we separate plans. The second thing I want to improve is the reflection of the palace in the water. Against the contrast of whole painting, it is lost, almost imperceptible.
Now the reflection of the palace merges with the bright edge of the sky. Almost the same thing happens with the palace itself, but there is a difference. Now we are playing on the nuance. And last, it remains for us to add details to the sculpture group. As I said, it should create a sense of volume. And it's done! On this step our picture is ready. Let me sum up. We tried to paint watercolor following the classic rules. Now we know why this is important, that we always draw from light to dark. Sky is the lightest part, then the water, but although it depends on your plot. We have analyzed the feature of the background and foreground, what you should pay attention to. We know how to work with the silhouette. Step by step you can repeat all these steps. The main thing is that the principle of work will remain the same. Just keep a plan in mind, draw a gorgeous sky and realistic reflection. A few words about how to dry such a watercolor properly. Don't leave it on a glass. Then it will dry unevenly and waves will appear. To dry it in a better way, you need paper towels or, newspapers or something like this. I now have a whole stack of paper towels that I have used many times. There is no need to throw them away. We carefully lay out these paper napkins on a flat surface. I do it on the desk. Here you can see some spots from previous already dried watercolors. We need a lot of napkins to form some kind of soft pillow for our artwork. This towel pad will evenly absorb moisture from our watercolor sheet, making it dry more evenly. I can even say almost perfectly flat. After drying, you can put the work under the press, but this is usually an unnecessary thing. The thicker the sheet of paper is, the more evenly it dries. We carefully pick up our work by the edge and put on the napkins, and leave it to dry. How long does it take depends on the humidity, as always. Maybe a day, maybe half a day. Usually during the day I paint, and at night my watercolor work dries. I put the napkins together for the next time. So that's it.
So that's it. Let me sum up a bit. Today's lesson. Today we learned how plot the composition, how prepare our paper for painting wet on wet. Now we know how to paint sky, water and reflections. I hope it was interesting one and helpful one. I would like to know your opinion, and if you have some questions or suggestions, please let me know. Maybe you have an interesting idea for the next topic, or maybe you have some special subject that you would like to explore about. Let me know, and I will prepare my next lesson according to your request. So thank you for being with me, listening to me, watching me. I wish you good luck with watercolor. As we all know, practice makes perfect, and especially with watercolor. So enjoy watercolor. It's the main thing. I wish you good luck. Have a great day. Bye.